putting yourself in our place. You are a human. We are a human. You have kids. We have kids.
Europe's migrant crisis is getting worse by the day.
A migrant crisis spiraling out of control.
Hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers are risking everything.
A human wave washing over Europe's southern shores.
Hundreds of thousands of migrants have streamed into Europe, the largest influx there since the end of World War II.
More than 24 governors are now saying the refugees are not welcome in their states.
Most of us, if not all, are well aware of the Syrian refugee crisis. It's been the headline of news stations and newspapers in the past few months. The extent of most people's knowledge on the issue is that people are fleeing their countries and seeking refuge in Europe and the Western world. Some countries that are accepting refugees are taking in far more than they can handle, while some are taking in extremely few or simply none at all.
The vast majority of them reside now in camps in the neighboring countries who are taking care of 95% of the refugees, while the Arab states of the Persian Gulf together have accepted 0 Syrian refugees, which has been called especially shameful by Amnesty International.
Since 2012, the United States has taken an estimated 2,174 Syrian refugees while planning to accept another 10,000 within 2 more years. The estimated total of 12,174 equates to less than 1% of the total refugees displaced, with some countries such as Germany and Sweden taking in tens and even hundreds of thousands of refugees. Is the United States doing enough? And how did all of this occur? Why are so many people fleeing their homes? The Syrian civil war started as a result of the dictators Hafez al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad refusing to give up power during the Arab Spring Reformation. While Hafez and Bashar were under constant pressure from the United States and other countries to step down as civil war erupted.
But in Syria, long-reigning dictator Bashar al-Assad has refused to relinquish power and instead has battled the rebellion with astonishing violence, including torturing children and gassing his own people with chemical weapons.
The radical Islamist group ISIS formed in order to try and seize power as a totalitarian government and started fighting both the Syrian government and rebel groups. Back in 2012, CIA operatives were sent to train rebels, distributing assault rifles, anti-tank rocket launchers, and other ammunition. In the same year, the United States granted an organization named Syrian Support Group a license to fund the Free Syrian Army. From 2012 to 2015, the United States spent an estimated $500 million in programs training, supplying, and aiding rebel groups. Even with the end of the program in October, the CIA and other organizations still run separate programs arming and aiding rebel groups. The citizens of Syria got caught in the middle of this war, forcing many people to vacate their homes and cross the dangerous Mediterranean Sea, often by unsafe, unreliable, and ill-made rafts to try and reach safety in particular European nations.
Thousands have turned to Europe, and they pay smugglers thousands of euros to get them via boat from Turkey, Morocco, or Egypt to Malta, southern Italy, or Greece's southern islands. Those smugglers are essentially the only people benefiting from Europe's inconsistent, inhumane, and disorganized response to the refugee crisis.
However, refugees are ending up in unprepared neighboring countries and are put into underfunded, undersupplied, and cramped camps. Even those prepared for some refugees have been unable to deal with the huge influx of people, as the amount of refugees has been seriously underestimated. Countries nearest to Syria are feeling the bulk of the refugee crisis, with countries such as Turkey and Lebanon currently hosting over 1 million refugees each. Many of these refugees are living in abandoned buildings and tent settlements on empty land. Other nations were hesitant to become involved in the crisis until one boy who had drowned on the journey across the Mediterranean washed up on a beach in Turkey. The picture of this dead boy inspired the population of nations to become more involved and made the death toll and other statistics seem more realistic. On top of it all, seeing a little boy die and wash up ashore is something that touches us all. That boy was innocent and a victim of tragedy. This calls into question the responsibility of other superpower nations to help those in imminent danger. Should larger and economically able nations reach out and accept refugees? We asked a politically active and well-informed junior at Penn State, Michael Straw, his thoughts on the issue.
If we don't accept refugees, I think we should be morally obligated to financially help the countries that are being affected by this. I mean, we've taken a part in this situation. I think we bear some responsibility.
One opposition point against bringing Syrian refugees into the United States is that they are considered a threat to national security.
Following the recent Paris attacks, an investigation is currently underway to determine if one of the Paris attackers posed as a refugee to gain entrance through Greece.
We are not screening refugees as they come in this country currently. All right, there is the Refugee Resettlement Program, of which he was a director and of which the firm he works for now is a contractor, brings in a lot of refugees, as he mentioned. They're not getting screened to anything near the level that they need to ensure we're not bringing problems into the country. That's a problem. And even worse is the idea, ISIS has said that they are trying right now to infiltrate as many jihadists into Europe and the United States as they can. What a perfect vehicle if we can't screen them, investigate them. We can't even find allies over there to train to fight ISIS.
Many Americans associate Islamic nations with terrorism and feel uncomfortable with refugees migrating to the U.S. and potentially bringing terrorism with them. However, this seems unlikely since the demographic of those migrating does not necessarily fit those who are extremist.
Of those that have already been admitted, half are children. Only 2% are single males of combat age. Now, this is not to say that terrorists only fit a certain demographic profile, but rather to paint the picture that the vast majority of those admitted do fit the profile of those most vulnerable. This vetting process takes about 2 years, and it can take up to 3 years after submitting an application before a refugee steps foot on U.S. soil, which is why some argue that pretending to be an asylum seeker would not be an efficient tactic for terrorists.
Locally, Democratic Governor of Pennsylvania Tom Wolf said he plans to continue to work with the federal government to allow refugees into the state and elsewhere across the nation, as one of the handful of governors to openly accept refugees.
I mean, people, I saw, like, for instance, Governor Wolf. I opposed Governor Wolf as well. Instead of outright denying, he's like, let's just open the doors.
Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Pedito has announced Pittsburgh will accept up to 500 refugees, while others seeking refuge are currently in the Allentown and Lehigh Valley areas. But why should we as Americans care for Syrians? Don't we have enough problems of our own to focus on? Why should we be the ones to step up and help these people find a better life and escape their dangerous homes? Besides being the ones who supplied rebels with weapons, training, and supplies, the US has an obligation as a world power to help those in distress.
I mean, it's just a moral obligation, and the fact that they say that we should have a moral obligation to rebuild Iraq and Afghanistan, and then go right back and say we're not going to accept 10,000 people from the mess that we created. I mean, it's absurd. It really is. It is absurd.
It's ironic that we as a nation are willing to be charitable and give money to nonprofits on Giving Tuesday and throughout the month of December, yet we cannot help those who are hungry and deprived find a better life in our country. As High Commissioner for Refugees in the United Nations, Antonio Gutierrez says, "What is at stake is nothing less than the surviving well-being of a generation of innocents." Beyond all of this, if we lose our humanity, what do we truly have left?